Okay, so today is July 16th, 2016. Okay, so we'll start with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato Samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato Samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato Samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so we are continuing with our discussion of Sutta number 43 in the Majjhima Nikaya. This is called the Mahāvedalla Sutta, which is translated the greater series of questions and answers. And as I mentioned during the previous classes on the sutta, this is a very technical sutta. And so for that reason, at the beginning I was very hesitant to introduce this sutta into the class because it deals with rather complex and quite technical points of doctrine. But I don't see Suki Park here. She was the one who insisted, why don't you do Sutta 43? Why don't you do Sutta 43? Okay, so I agreed to do it. And so if some of the topics that we're going to be discussing seem far beyond your own range of experience and capacity, you can assure yourself you're not alone. Even the person who's teaching the sutta, for him, it's far beyond his range and capacity, but he just knows what the text says. Okay, so I think we didn't get into the section on the first jhana last time. Is that correct? Okay, so now we're on the very bottom of page 390. This section is called the first jhana. Okay, and so this is the monk Venerable Mahākotita questioning the Venerable Sāriputta. So he says, what is the first jhana? And Sāriputta explains, this is the standard sutta formula for the first jhana: secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome, there she is, unwholesome mental states. A bhikkhu enters and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought with rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. This is called the first jhana. Okay, so here we have the standard formula, which you encounter dozens of times, at least a dozen times in the Majjhima Nikaya and in other Nikayas. But now Mahākotita raises a question which shows what I call this drift or bent towards an analytical approach to the teaching, where it's sort of moving in the direction of the Abhidhamma methodology. So he says, friend, how many factors does the first jhana have? And so Sāriputta says, when a monk has entered the first jhana, there occur applied thought, sustained thought, rapture, pleasure, and unification of mind. That is how the first jhana has 5 factors. Well, these are called, in Pali, the word used is anga. Anga. And so in the Abhidhamma, we get one category of phenomena which is analyzed. It's called the jhāna, jhānanga, the factors of jhāna. So the Abhidhamma will take each of the jhanas individually and then analyze what are the factors, the anga of that jhana. But here we're concerned only with the first jhana, where it is said that when a monk is entered on the first jhana, there occurs applied thought. This is vitakka. So we have these 5 factors. What's called applied thought is vitakka, which technically it's explained as the application of the mind to the object. And so that is sort of taking the mind, as you will, almost in your hand, and putting the mind on the object. And then vichara, which usually goes along with vitakka, is here translated sustained thought. But more recently I've been translating it as examination. But it's not an intellectual examination of the object, but it's just, I would call it continuing to observe the object. So for example, if you're doing mindfulness of breathing, it's vitakka, which is applying the mind to the breath. And vichara, sustained thought, examination, which is observing the breath. Okay, then there's rapture. This is piti, joy, elation, exhilaration. Then pleasure, which is the feeling tone in the jhana. Feeling not in the sense of emotion, but simply the feeling of a pleasant feeling, a feeling of ease of mind. And if we look at the standard canonical description of the first jhana, we find those 4 factors are mentioned. We see it's accompanied by applied thought and sustained thought, with rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. So up to this point, the 4 jhana factors are simply pulling material out from the standard formula. But now, the list of jhana factors introduces something which is not in the standard formula, and that is what's it's written here in Pali, chittase kakata. This is what is translated as unification of mind. And I guess the compilers, well, even going back before the Abhidhamma, the compilers of the Sutta would have felt or realized that in order for a state to qualify as a jhana, the mind has to be unified or continuously focused or absorbed in the object. And so there has to be a mental factor to account for that absorption in the object. And that mental factor, they decided, is to be called ekaggata. Ekaggata comes from, it's actually a compound, which comes from eka is one, then agga is a point or a tip, and then the ta just turns it into a noun. The ta is somewhat like ness in English. One-pointedness. Okay, so those are the 5 factors of the first jhana. And then as this mode of analysis began to progress further, we consult the Abhidhamma. Then we see factors mentioned for the second jhana, third jhana, and fourth jhana. So we have in the second jhana, which of these jhana factors are missing? No. Right, very good. So when you progress from the first jhana to the second jhana, then vitakka, vichara fall away. Progressing from the second jhana to the third jhana, which factors drop away? But let me just say first, okay, so the factors in the second jhana are piti, sukha, chitase kagata. When one goes from the second jhana to the third jhana, what change takes place in the jhana factors? Piti. Right. Piti falls away. And so the third jhana has sukha and ekagata. Then in progressing from the third jhana to the fourth jhana, what change takes place in the jhana factors? Okay, sukha falls away, but sukha is a feeling we call vedana. And every jhana, or every state of consciousness, has to have a feeling. So when sukha falls away, when pleasure falls away, it doesn't mean that there's no feeling at all in the fourth jhana, but pleasure gets replaced by something else, which is called, you don't have to use the Pali, you could use English. There's a more precise word for this feeling than equanimity. Somebody said tranquility? No. I mean, there's tranquility there, but there's a very precise term for this.
Neither.
I have to speak a little.
Neither pain nor pleasure.
Right. It's the feeling that's neither painful nor pleasant. Technically, or in Pali, it's called dukkhamasukha vedana. You want to practice? Dukkhamasukha vedana. Very easy to say. Okay. Okay, and then the next question is, how many factors are abandoned in the first jhana, and how many factors are possessed? The second part of the question seems almost identical with the previous question. Okay, so what are abandoned in the first jhana are precisely the 5 hindrances. So sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, or dullness and drowsiness, restlessness and remorse and doubt. So those are the 5 hindrances, and even to progress towards the first jhana, this is in the commentarial scheme, the scheme of the Visuddhimagga. Before one goes into the first jhana, one enters a stage of samadhi which is called neighborhood concentration, access concentration, threshold concentration. So in the threshold concentration, already the 5 hindrances are eliminated. But the elimination of the 5 hindrances in the threshold samadhi is not very secure, because they still have a tendency to rise up again. But in the first jhana, then the 5 hindrances are very securely pushed away or suppressed. And so that's why it says that the 5 hindrances, the sutta uses the word abandoned, but we have to remember, this is an important point, the word abandoned has different levels of meaning in the suttas. So one kind of abandoning is what takes place in the jhana, which means abandoning by suppression, by pushing away, not in the sense of Freudian repression. If there are any psychologists here, it's not in that sense. But it's just that by the strength of the concentration of mind, the samadhi, the hindrances don't have the opportunity to arise. They're put into a state of suspended animation. But there's another kind of abandoning which is accomplished by the world-transcending path. That is called abandoning by eradication. With the world-transcending path, then the hindrances and the other defilements are eradicated. They're said to be uchina mula, which means cut off at the root, so that they can never arise again. In the case of the jhanas, somebody might be very skilled in the jhanas, and so they can suppress the hindrances. But if they become a little bit negligent and careless in their conduct and their mental activities, it could create an opportunity for the hindrances to rise again. Or under provocative external conditions, the hindrances can arise. But through the path, the world-transcending path, when the hindrances are eradicated, they can never arise again. Okay, maybe at this point, any questions? Okay, then we'll go on to the next section. And I mentioned earlier several times, because the sutta takes the form of a series of question and answers, there's sometimes like jumps in topic, and so it's not always so clear to see the connection between one section and the next that follows. Sometimes perhaps there is no clear connection at all. It's just a kind of miscellaneous exploration of various topics. Okay, so now we have a new topic introduced. So now Mahākotita says that these 5 faculties each have a separate field, a separate domain, and do not experience each other's field and domain. That is the eye faculty, ear faculty, nose faculty, tongue faculty, and the body faculty. So each has its own domain. For example, the eye faculty, what is its domain? I have to speak loudly. Okay, sights, or in more technical language we would say rupa, it's visible forms. The ear faculty has its domain, sounds. The nose faculty, odors. Taste faculty, flavors. Body faculty has textures, tactile objects. Okay, so now of these 5 faculties, each with its separate field and so on, what is their resort? What experiences their fields and domains? And then to get to the answer, we have to jump down a little bit. Now, these 5 faculties, each having a separate field, they have mind as their resort. Mind experiences their fields and domains. So the mind, according to Buddhism, is the 6th faculty, and the mind can experience the fields of all of the other 5 sense faculties. Again, to use an example I've used before, when I say, look out and see Chris is wearing a yellow shirt, so I identify the shirt as the color yellow. So it's the eye faculty picks up the yellow color, but the mind faculty identifies it as yellow. If I taste from this cup, okay, the tongue faculty picks up the taste, but in this case, the mind faculty knows the taste and it knows that I've tasted that before, but the mind faculty is a little bewildered. It doesn't know what it is. Oh, this is the juju, some kind of berry? What is the name of that berry?
Goji berry.
It's a goji berry, right. Okay. So now the mind faculty has suddenly gotten a little brighter. Okay, so the mind faculty can know the objects of all the other senses, whereas the eye cannot hear sounds. The nose cannot experience, it cannot smell the texture of this cloth. Of course, if I go like this, the nose can do it, but that's, of course, technically that's the body faculty extending over the nose that experiences that texture. Okay, now we could see the movement of the sutta. Now we're moving from the 5 sense faculties. The question comes up, what do these 5 faculties stand in dependence on? What, in other words, what do they depend on? What sustains them? And then the answer comes that these 5 faculties stand in dependence on something called vitality, or in Pali the word is vayu. Excuse me?
I was just repeating what
Oh. Did I say vayu? Oh, no. If I said vayu, that was a mistake. Ayu. Yeah, vayu is wind, the wind element. But ayu is vitality, or more technically, it's the life faculty. So it's said that what keeps us alive, what makes us alive, is the presence of ayu, vitality, which in the Abhidhamma system will be identified with something called Jivitindriya. Jivitindriya is the life faculty. I don't know how this would square with modern biology. Do we have any biologists in the room? I think it's safe that we don't have any. Okay, so in the ancient Indian way of conceiving, what makes a living being alive is the activity, the presence and the activity of jivitindriya, the life faculty. And so death takes place when the life faculty is cut off. So if somebody kills another creature, what brings about the death of that creature, it said, is the cutting off or the destruction of the life faculty. Okay, so according to this answer, the 5 faculties, the 5 sense faculties, functioning as such depend on vitality. That is, it's only as long as one is alive that the 5 senses can function. You know, if a dead person, we still have the form of the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, but because in the dead person, the life faculty is gone, the eye doesn't see any forms, the ear doesn't hear any sounds. Except perhaps in that 1960s film, is the Night of the Living Dead. Okay, so now the question comes, what does vitality depend upon? And then the answer is that vitality, or life, animation, the life faculty, depends on heat or warmth. This is the warmth of the body. And then the question comes up, what does heat depend on? And heat, it said, depends on vitality. Okay, so we have these 2 things depending upon one another. Heat depends on vitality or the life faculty. The life faculty depends on heat, on a certain balance of heat. If it gets too cold, then one gets what is that called? Hypothermia. And too cold, and the life faculty can no longer function, death takes place. If there's too much heat, again, the life faculty, maybe the heat of the body gets overwhelmed, and then the life faculty perishes. Okay, so now Mahākotita is a bit puzzled, so he says, we understand, the Sāriputta has said, that vitality depends on heat, and heat depends on vitality. So he says, how should we understand this? And Sāriputta says that he'll explain with a simile. So he says it's just as when an oil lamp is burning, so its radiance its light is seen in dependence on the flame, and the flame is seen in dependence on its light or radiance. Okay, so the flame creates the light, and so the light depends on the flame. This is something that doesn't quite work here. The light depends on the flame. The flame doesn't actually depend on the light. So the trick is by saying is seen in dependence on. So the light is seen in dependence on the flame, and the flame is seen in dependence on the light. Even if the simile is imperfect, but it's just used to illustrate the point that these 2 things, life or vitality and bodily heat, depend on each other. We have to remember also this is coming out from ancient Indian culture, and so it's drawing upon the ancient Indian physiology or science of the body. Okay, now we're going to be moving into from this introducing vitality. Now we're moving into a discussion of a particular meditative attainment called the cessation of feeling and perception.
Sounds like a coma.
It's not like a coma, no. It sounds like it, but it's not. And there was a discussion of this attainment of cessation in the shorter series of questions and answers, Sutta number 44. And so to get a fuller picture of the attainment of cessation, one has to take those two suttas together. Okay, so now Mahākotita asks, okay, are vital formations things that can be felt, or are they things that cannot be felt? Well, maybe let's put this another way. Are vital formations feelings, or are they not feelings? And then Sāriputta says, vital formations are not things that can be felt. In other words, they're not feelings. Because if vital formations were things that can be felt, then a monk who has entered the cessation of perception and feeling would not be seen to emerge from it. That is, when the monk has entered the cessation of perception and feelings, then feelings have ceased. And so if vital formations or vitality were things that could be felt, if they were a feeling, then when one enters the cessation of feeling, then one would be dead. There's no feeling, and so there's no vital formations, and so it would be like a voluntary death. And if you're dead, if you enter a meditative state and you die in that state, then you don't emerge from it. You're gone. Like there are some, it's supposed to be like an ability that some very advanced meditators can acquire, and that they sit down and they go into the meditative attainment, and then they extinguish their vital formations within that attainment. And then when that happens, then they're dead and gone. You know, they might still be sitting in the lotus posture, but they never come out from it. Okay, but it's because the vital formations are not things that can be felt, they're not feelings. And so one who enters the cessation of perception and feeling can be seen to emerge from it, because he's still alive within that attainment. Okay, now comes the question, when this body is bereft or deprived of how many things, is it then discarded and forsaken, left lying senseless like a log? In other words, when how many things have gone, is the body really completely dead? Then Sāriputta answers, when the body is deprived of three things, it is then discarded and forsaken like senseless like a log. So what are those three things? Vitality, heat, bodily heat, and consciousness. Okay, now comes the question, what is the difference between one who is dead, who has completed his time, and a monk who has entered the cessation of perception and feeling? I think in American English, completed his time means when a prisoner has finished his prison sentence. Is that correct?
It seems that way.
But in Pali, it's kala kirya, which means having done time. Having done one's time, that means you're dead. Okay, so what is the difference between one who is dead and a monk who has entered the cessation of perception and feeling? And this is sort of asking, in that present condition, when you look at them, what is the difference between them? Okay, in the case of one who is dead, his bodily formations have ceased, his verbal formations have ceased, his mental formations have ceased, his vitality is exhausted, his heat has been dissipated, and his faculties, the sense faculties, are fully broken up. Okay, this sentence needs a little unpacking. Okay, so what is meant by the bodily formations? Bodily formations, verbal formations, mental formations here. To get the answer to this question, one has to go to the next sutta, sutta number 44. And this is on page 399. And paragraph 14, a layman is asking a bhikkhuni these questions. So he says, what is the bodily formation? What is the verbal formation? What is the mental formation? Okay, in and out breathing are the bodily formation. Applied thought and sustained thought are the verbal formation. And perception and feeling are the mental formation. And then the question is raised, why are these things called bodily formation and so on? And the answer that's given is, in-breathing and out-breathing are bodily things that are bound up with the body. And so they are called, so in-breathing and out-breathing are called the bodily formation. Or maybe bodily activity would work better. Okay, then comes the verbal activities. Okay, so first one applies thought and sustains thought, or one thinks and examines. And then subsequently, one breaks out into speech. And so if I'm going to say something, even if I'm speaking rapidly, but in a very, very quick way, thoughts are going through my mind, sort of determining what I'm going to say. Okay, so thought, applied and sustained thought, those are called the verbal activities. Okay, and then perception and feeling are mental states that are bound up with the mind. So that is why perception and feeling are called mental activities, or the mental formation. Okay, so in the case of one who is dead, is he breathing in and out? No. Is he thinking and examining things? No. Does he have perception and feeling? How do you know? Okay, of course his vitality is gone, that's why he's dead. His heat, the body becomes cold when it's dead. And the faculties are fully broken up. There's no functioning of sight, hearing, and so on. Okay, in the case of one who has entered the cessation of perception and feeling, okay, the bodily activities have ceased. There's no in and out breathing. The verbal activities have ceased. There's no thinking and examining. And then the surprising thing is his mental activities have ceased. So there's not even feeling and perception going on. That's why it's called cessation of feeling and perception. Okay, but his vitality is not exhausted, still alive. His heat has not been dissipated, the body is still warm, and his faculties have become exceptionally clear. This is a little bit of a puzzle because within that attainment there's no seeing, hearing, smelling, and so on, because all mental activity has ceased. So I don't quite know how to understand this. Perhaps what it might mean is that when one emerges from this cessation of perception and feeling, then the faculties become exceptionally, they're functioning with extreme lucidity, with extreme accuracy, or maybe they're very bright, very peaceful. Does anybody have any other ideas about what could be meant by this? You don't have to worry because I'm not sure myself. Okay, so we'll just leave it at that. And sometimes the question that's brought up just... Did you have something to say?
Would you entertain the question? I have a question, right?
Only if it's an answer to my question.
Okay. No, I don't have an answer.
Because then wait till I ask for questions. The question sometimes comes up, if breathing is actually stopped, in and out breathing, how can a person live if they're not breathing? It seems breath is essential to life. And, I don't have the definite answer to that question. One possibility is that the skin is still breathing, and so the skin is taking in whatever oxygen is needed and discharging or emitting carbon dioxide and waste. Another answer might be that even though it's said that the in and out breathing is stopped, but actually it's still occurring, but very, very subtle level. I think even Venerable Dhammajiva said that during the meditation retreat last month, if I remember correctly. Okay, so that is the difference between one who is dead and the monk who has entered the cessation of perception and feeling. Okay, now I can take your question.
Well, for me...
And use the microphone.
I've got this down. I've asked this question 1,000 ways before, but...
Okay, take the microphone.
Here we are again. So when you're dead, everything stops.
Yeah.
But what happens to that? When we talk about karma and we talk about that, what are we going to use? What word can we use? That spirit.
For what goes on to the next life?
I'm sorry?
For what continues on to the next existence?
What?
Again,
that's not mentioned here.
Yeah, it's not bringing up that particular question. And in fact, I don't even know. Well, actually, there are some expressions in the sutta which indicate that. It's sometimes called vijnana sutta, which is sutta is stream, vijnana is consciousness, the stream of consciousness. And then sutta number 106 uses the expression samvatanika vijnana. Samvatanika, it's the rolling on or progressing or even evolving consciousness. So it seems like they're trying to find a way to express the continuity of personal existence without bringing in the Atman or the self or the soul. And so it's using this expression, sangvatanika, sangvatana, it's rolling on, and vijnana, consciousness. So it's the consciousness which is always changing, it doesn't retain its identity. So the Buddha says it's not the same consciousness, and yet the consciousness continues on through as a process, an ever-changing but continuous process from one existence to the next.
Thank you.
Bhante, it's always been my understanding that when the breath ceases, that's also the fourth jhana. Is that correct?
Yeah, it said that in the fourth jhana, the in and out breathing have stopped. Yeah.
So, is that what we're talking about?
No, this isn't the fourth jhana. This is a state beyond the fourth jhana.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't go into details about this attainment of cessation of perception and feeling. Okay, with the attainment of the first jhana, vitaka and vichara, thought and applied and sustained thought, cease. Okay, with the attainment of the fourth jhana, the in and out breathing cease. But even in the fourth jhana and in the higher states of samadhi beyond the fourth jhana, the formless meditations, there's still perception and feeling. So, from the fourth jhana on, the bodily activity has ceased and the verbal activity has ceased, but the mental activity is still continuing. But with the attainment of cessation of perception and feeling, then even the mental activity ceases.
Thank you.
Ceases.
But attainment of fourth jhana, is it that it completely ceases, or like you said, that there can be very, very shallow breathing which is almost not detectable?
Yeah, this is what I said.
I find it difficult to believe that you can stop breathing and then live for...
The text always use the expression that the in and out breathing cease.
Physically you may not see, but maybe at a very, very...
Yeah, this is something I don't know. But, if we take the standpoint that some degree of breathing is necessary to sustain life, then it can be that just in a very, very subtle way, the body through the lungs is taking in air and expelling air. But it might be just so subtle that it just seems like no breath is taking place at all. Okay, I want to move on now to... Oh yes, please bring the microphone to the back. Or come up.
So, this is after practicing meditation from my teacher, Dr. Kumar. And he has practiced samadhi or jhanas for jhana up to fourth level. And then he demonstrated in Korea. In fourth jhana, the heart actually stops. And it was demonstrated by all the equipment. It was not just like a human saying that the heart stopped. So in fourth jhana, heart actually stops. But that's a good question. I don't know how a person still lives. He actually stopped heart for 1 hour. And based on the experience I had in meditation, the difference that I think between cessation of feeling and perception of the person who is alive and the person who is dead is that they are the happiest being because they examine the situation in its complete trueness. They don't react to it. So they are the happiest person because they can actually see the things at 360-degree angle, not just in the way one can look at it. So I think that's the difference between a person who is dead Like,
Well, of course, the person who's dead has no happiness.
Yeah, he doesn't
No.
have any vitality. But the person who is alive and who can experience that state beyond fourth jhana, which is the supramundane state of mind, is the person who develops that complete happiness by removing the impurities in the body.
Yeah. But I should say further that first, to become an arahat, which would be like a fully liberated being, it's not necessary to be able to achieve the cessation of perception and feeling. This is said to be attainable only, and then to attain the cessation of perception and feeling, it's not necessary to be an arahat. It's said to be, this state is said to be accessible to non-returners and arahats. But it's accessible only to non-returners and arahats who are able to achieve the 8 previous meditative attainments. That is the 4 jhanas and the 4 formless meditations. And the method to attain it is explained in the Visuddhimagga, path of purification. One enters into each of the meditative attainments in sequence, and then comes out and then contemplates it as impermanent, dukkha, and non-self. So one goes into the first jhana, comes out, contemplates anicca, dukkha, anatta, goes into the second jhana, comes out, contemplates anicca, dukkha, anatta, and then goes through third jhana, fourth jhana, first formless attainment, second formless attainment, third formless attainment, in the same way. Attain it, come out, contemplate impermanent, dukkha, non-self. Then one makes the determination to go into the attainment of cessation. And then one has to do some other preliminary determinations. Then one will go into the 4th formless attainment, the base of neither perception nor non-perception, and then one remains in there for a few turns of consciousness, and then everything comes to an end, all the mental activity. Perception, feeling, all the mental activities stop, and one is in cessation. And one can stay in there for as long as one determines, a day, 3 days, up to the 7 days, that's it. And then it's said in the case, maybe this is commentarial, when the monk comes out of the attainment of cessation and then goes on alms round, the offerings made to him or to a nun would be of the greatest power of merit. So that is why it's said that those who achieve these attainments, when they want to benefit the householders, they'll go into the attainment of cessation, come out, and then go on alms round. And so offerings made to them then become extremely meritorious. Okay, I want to, because we have still some section to complete of the sutta. So now we come to a new section of the sutta, and this is called this section deals with various kinds of ceto vimutti, liberation of mind. We'll hear deliverance of mind. Okay, so first, Mahākotita asks, how many conditions are there for the attainment of the neither painful nor pleasant liberation of mind? And then Sāriputta says that there are 4 conditions for this attainment. Here, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, Those are two conditions, abandoning pleasure, abandoning pain, and with the previous disappearance of joy and grief. So those are four types of feelings which are absent in the fourth absorption. So there's pleasure, which is bodily pleasure. There's pain, which is bodily pain. There's joy, which is mental pleasure. And then something called grief, but it's better, maybe sadness. It's any kind of mental unpleasant feeling. So those feelings are abandoned. And so with the abandoning of those four feelings, then one enters and dwells in the fourth jhāna, which has neither painful nor pleasant feeling, and purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. So those are the four conditions for attaining the neither painful nor pleasant liberation of mind. So it's the abandoning of the four other feelings. So the only feeling that remains is neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Okay, now the next question, how many conditions are there for attainment of the signless liberation of mind? Okay, this will be the liberation, this will be what we call the supramundane or world-transcending liberation of mind. And this is the liberation of mind that takes nibbana as the object of experience. So there are two conditions for the attainment of the signless liberation of mind. Non-attention to all signs. So what are the signs here? Actually, I think even object might be a better rendering than sign. Because when I hear the word sign, I think of stop signs, no parking signs, or an arrow pointing, take that road. But this is not, signs with a human significance given to them. But it seems to be the features of objects, the characteristics of sense of objects, of sense or of thought. So the Pali word used nimitta. And then the absence of any nimittas, any marks or features of objects, is animitta, the signless, markless, objectless liberation of mind. Okay, so the first condition is non-attention, not paying attention to any, or not adverting or turning the mind to any object, not only of the senses, but even any kind of features of mental objects. And then attention to the signless element, that is the animitta element. And that, according to the commentary, that is nibbana. So this is the meditative attainment that's reached by turning the mind away from all conditioned phenomena, all conditioned objects, and focusing the mind on nibbana itself. This is a kind of meditative attainment which is accessible only to the Aryan persons, to the noble ones. Particularly, probably most easily accessible only to the arahats. Okay, so those are two conditions for attaining the signless or markless liberation of mind. Okay, then what are the conditions for the persistence of the signless liberation of mind? Okay, so we have three conditions. The first two are the same: non-attention to all signs, attention to the signless element, and then prior determination, that is, determining its duration. So if one wants to stay in the signless liberation for 1 hour, one makes the prior determination, let me be in it for 1 hour, and it will last for 1 hour. And when 1 hour is over, one comes out. If one wants to stay in it for 3 hours, 6 hours, a whole day, according to one's determination, one remains, and when the time is up, one comes out. And that leads into the conditions for emerging from the signless liberation. That is, when the mind turns away from the signless element, away from nibbana, and takes up some other object of thought. And when that happens, then one emerges from the signless liberation. Okay, now comes the interesting part of the discussion. Mahākotita raises the question. He says that there are these different liberations of mind. There's one called the immeasurable or measureless liberation of mind, the deliverance or liberation of mind through nothingness, the liberation of mind through voidness. This is sunyata, or let's render it emptiness, and the signless liberation of mind. Are these states different in meaning and different in name, or are they one in meaning and different only in name? So it's obvious the names are different. We have 4 names here: measureless, nothingness, voidness, signless, liberation of mind. Are they 4 names pointing to different attainments, or are they just 4 different names for the same attainment? Okay, then Sāriputta answers. He says, there is a way in which these states are different in meaning and different in name, and there is a way in which they are the same in meaning and different only in name. You see, in other suttas and maybe in other discourses of the Buddha, even that were not recorded, we have these names used for different meditative attainments on different occasions. So he's asking, are they all pointing to the same thing, or are they pointing to different attainments? And Sāriputta says there are 2 ways to explain. Both different, according to one method, they're different names for different attainments. According to another method, different names for the same attainment. Okay, so first, they'll explain how they are different names for different attainments. So the first one we have is the measureless, the immeasurable liberation of mind. So what is that? That is the 4 immeasurable meditations. That is, boundless loving kindness, boundless compassion, boundless altruistic joy, boundless equanimity. So in those 4 states, one radiates those qualities without any bounds or measure to all living beings. And so those are called measureless liberations of mind. The mind is liberated from all of the hindrances, and it goes into a state of absorption similar to the jhanas, but it has measureless living beings as its object. So that is called the measureless liberation. Okay, then comes paragraph 32, the liberation of mind through nothingness. Okay, and this is explained as the attainment of the third formless or arupa meditation. That is the base of nothingness. So this is a state of samadhi, even beyond the four jhanas, in which the mind takes what I call the nothingness aspect of consciousness as its object. And that's still a mundane attainment. It's not yet a world-transcending or super-mundane attainment. Because if one achieves this and masters it, one won't necessarily acquire the wisdom that brings final liberation. One will be reborn in the formless realm and remain there for thousands of aeons and then come back when the karma is exhausted. Okay, then what is the liberation of mind through voidness or emptiness? And this is explained in terms of the contemplation of non-self. So here the monk gone to the forest reflects, considers thus, this is empty of the self and of what belongs to a self. So that is contemplation with insight. And that contemplation will lead to final liberation. But in the stage of insight, it's still technically called a mundane achievement. Because it takes as its object the five aggregates. One is examining the body, feelings, perceptions, mental activities, consciousness, and seeing that they are all sunya, empty of a self or anything relating to a self. Okay, then we have fourth, the signless liberation, which we already had. Okay, so here with non-attention to all signs, a monk enters and dwells in the signless concentration of mind. This is called the signless liberation of mind. This is, amongst these four, this is the only one that is the world-transcending ultimate liberation of mind. And the commentaries identify this signless liberation with a particular meditative state, which is called, by a big name, big word, Arahata Pala Samadhi. But it shouldn't be so frightened by the length of the word, because it's a compound. So the base is samadhi, concentration, or actually, it should be samapatti. Samapatti means attainment. Okay, so the base is samapatti, attainment. Then pala means fruit. And arahata is arahatship. So this is the attainment of the fruit of arahatship. So this is a particular meditative attainment accessible to the arahat, through which he'll directly experience the unconditioned state nibbana. Even with the conditioned body and mind, one experiences the unconditioned. And since Nibbana is without the marks of conditioned things, or the signs of conditioned things, it's called signless, markless, featureless. Okay, so in this way we have four distinct states, four distinct liberations. The liberation through boundless loving kindness, compassion, and so on. That's the measureless liberation. The nothingness liberation is the attainment of the third formless absorption, the base of nothingness. The emptiness liberation is the contemplation of the body and mind as being non-self. And then the signless liberation is, or markless liberation, is the world-transcending liberation, the fruit of arahatship. Okay, now we come to the other method. This is the method by which these states are one in meaning, that is, they designate the same thing, but they're different only in name. Okay, so first he's going to take each of these attainments in the same order. So first, what's going to be the measureless liberation of mind. So he says, lust is a maker of measurement. Hate is a maker of measurement. Delusion is a maker of measurement. Or we might, maybe to make this a little more intelligible, we could say lust, hatred, and delusion are limiting factors or confining factors, constricting factors. And so for a monk, or I have to add for a nun whose taints, whose defilements are destroyed, abandoned, cut off at the root, for a monk whose asavas are destroyed, these, that is lust, hate, and delusion, are abandoned, cut off at the root, and so on, no longer subject to arise. And so when lust, hatred, and delusion are eradicated, that means all the things that make for limitation, for all the barriers, the boundaries are broken down. And so that state of mind then becomes measureless. And so, when lust, hatred, and delusion are eradicated, then one can enter into that fruition, attainment of arahatship, or attainment of the fruit of arahatship, and that is called the measureless liberation. Because all limitations, constrictions, confinements are broken down and eradicated. Okay, then coming the second one. Here there's something of a word play here. So lust is a something, hatred is a something, delusion is a something. And so for one whose taints are destroyed, these somethings are abandoned, cut off at the root, and so on, no longer subject to future arising. And so if all the kinds, and so when those somethings are eliminated, the somethings are kinchana. The word for something is kinchana. Which the commentary explains also has the sense of impediment. that which is an impediment. So when this is eliminated, then there is akinchana, which means nothing. And that attainment is called akinchanya, nothingness. But this is different. It's not the same as the third formless meditation, but this is the fruit of arahatship, which is called the nothingness liberation, because the somethings of lust, hate, and delusion have been eliminated. Okay, then the third one we have again, paragraph 37. Lust is a maker of signs. Hate is a maker of signs. Delusion is a maker of signs. This can be understood in various ways. How are they makers of signs? The way I would understand it is that lust, hatred, and delusion, well, lust is a maker of signs in that it creates the appearance of things as being attractive. If you look at, say, put a diamond down here, and then I'm a multi-millionaire who collects valuable items, or I'm a woman who loves beautiful jewelry, then I look at that diamond and I think, oh, I want this. It's so beautiful, so attractive. But, I look at it and, it's sparkling and nice to look at, but it doesn't have any significance of being attractive, something that I want. Okay, hatred, when you have hatred, and then there's a person that you have a grudge against walks into the room, then your mind projects all sorts of imaginings about that person. That's a nasty guy, a bad guy, rotten guy. The mind sort of cringes when that guy walks into the room. So it's projecting all sorts of significances onto that appearance. But if one is free of hatred, then that person comes into the room, and if he's really a nasty guy, then you just have compassion for him. But in most cases, he'll just be an ordinary fellow, and so you just observe it as a form coming into the room. And then it's through delusion that all kinds of significance are ascribed to things. The ideas of permanence, pleasure, self in particular. Okay, so when the monk has eradicated the defilements, then these lust, hatred, and delusion are eliminated, and so there's no longer any making of signs. And so this then becomes the access to the signless or markless liberation of mind. Okay, now in each point, at each of these paragraphs, we've covered one of those liberations of mind, but there's one which has not been treated separately, and that is the emptiness or voidness liberation of mind. But that is connected to each of these three by the last sentence, when it said, taking paragraph 35, for example, it says, of all the kinds of immeasurable deliverance of mind, the unshakable liberation of mind is pronounced the best. That unshakable liberation of mind, that is the liberation of arhatship. And then he says that unshakable liberation of mind is void of lust, void of hate, void of delusion. And then similarly with the liberation of mind through nothingness, the unshakable liberation of mind is pronounced the best. That unshakable liberation of mind is void of lust, void of hate, void of delusion. And then of all the kinds of signless liberation of mind, the unshakable one is declared the best. That unshakable liberation of mind is void of lust, void of hate, void of delusion. So each of these three kinds of unshakable liberation of mind is also the emptiness liberation of mind, because each is empty of lust, hatred, and delusion. Okay, so that is the way in which those states are one in meaning, or in other words, they're pointing to the same thing. They signify the same attainment, but they're just different names for that attainment. And that attainment that they're referring to, again, it's the arahata pala samadhi, the attainment of the fruit of arahatship. Okay, and that takes us to the end of the sutta. Why is everybody laughing?
Delighted.
Interesting. So, any questions that come up? Uh-oh. Now, this is a particular sign, is it? In which my dosa, my aversion, is going to get provoked and project some unhappy feelings onto that noise. Unless I can go quickly into the perception of feeling, cessation of perception and feeling for 5 minutes, for 3 minutes. But it's disturbing, I can't go in. So any questions? Or you can just think about it and then save the questions. We'll come back at 12. Yeah, we usually come back here. I'll get it a little mixed up. 12:15, right? Yeah, 12:15 for a question and answer session. Okay, so let us end with the sharing of the merits. And this is the end of our Majjhima Nikaya course, which went on now for 7 years. And so next time, for the next 5 weeks, we're having day-long sessions on Saturday on what are called the 4 protective meditations. That is the meditation on the qualities of the Buddha, the meditation on loving kindness, meditation on the parts of the body, and the meditation on death. And then each Saturday will be devoted to one of those subjects. Then the last Saturday we bring them all together. I think you'll find this, I'll have to ask them to post this on the website, the Bao's website, but I think an announcement was sent out already about it. Was the announcement about the Abhidhamma retreat sent out?
Yes, well, with the wrong web address.
The wrong web address?
Well, it's www.baos. Doesn't have the dot. It's just a little mistake, so you can't get there.
Oh.
Unless you know.
Oh, then I have
I was
to...
able to register.
Yeah, me too. I mean, if you know.
Yeah, I'll have to ask them to to look into that and correct it. Okay, so let us end then sharing the merits, Maha merits, accumulated over 7 years. Okay, so now we get all of the devas from Sakas coming to look in, and Mahabrahma, and the Bhutas, and the fierce spirits, and the dragon spirits. Akasata Chabumata Deva Naga Mahedika Punyantang Anumoditva Chiram Rakantu Sasanam. Akasata Chabumata Deva Naga Mahedika Punyantang Anumoditva Chiram Rakantu Desanam. Akasata Chabumata Deva Naga Mahedika Punyantang Anumoditva Chiram Rakantu Mangparam. Etavatacham hehi sampadam punya sampadam sabbe devanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadam punya sampadam sabbe bhudanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadam punya sampadam sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Bhavagopadaya avicchetato etantare satakayupapanna rupya rupicha asanya sanino tukha pamuchantu pusantu nibutin. Okay, now, when I sent out the announcement about this class, I said that if anybody has not taken the 3 refuges before and would like to take it, we can do the ceremony today. Who would like to do the ceremony of taking refuge? Okay, so we have 2. Okay. 3. Okay, 3. So far I've seen, put the hand up high. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I see 4. Did somebody see a 5th?
No, I just want to draw Banda's attention is 4, it's not 3.
Okay. So we could do that. I want you to be comfortable taking a leisurely lunch. Let us do that about 12:10, okay? That should take 10 minutes. Then we have the discussion. Could all of you come back? You're able to come back? Okay, so we'll do that at 12:10. Oh, so we still have to end with 3. Oh. Okay, so we have vows of Buddha.
How to Banda.